afternoon, good evening, good night, wherever you're joining us from today. I'd like to welcome you to month 2 of the 2023 Quilters Playcation Adventure Sewalong. We are here exploring improv in quilting, having a great time with it. This is technically our 3rd year, but we're going to go with 2nd of me guiding you through a series of improv quilting techniques and steps, building a story, building a quilt, maybe, but really just about having fun and playing and enjoying ourselves as we do this. That's really the goal here. So, welcome to everybody today. I'm having my tea. We just got back. I'm a little bit late coming on today. We just got back from 5 days in California, which was wonderful. Such a nice break from the snow here. Oh my gosh. And it snowed more and got really cold while we were gone. So even though it wasn't super warm in California, it was a hell of a lot warmer than it is here. So I was very appreciative for that. My husband and I were chaperoning a group of ballet dancers ranging in age from 10 all the way up to 18 from our dance studio. We were dance parents this weekend. It's the one and only competition that our school does. We're not a competition school. So the kids work hard all year on this one performance. It's all solos. And they had a great time. I spent the weekend cooking and driving for my house of 8 teenagers who were amazing, lovely children. I missed my own teens. I really did. But these kids were just great. So I was really, really happy to be there. But it was a bit of a rough start to the morning, but nice to not have to be up and feeding everybody. But I'm here with you, so that's what counts. That's what counts. I just want to check before we go a little bit further that I have got the chat set up today for everybody. I think I did it right this time. Those of you who were here or watched last month, you saw that I didn't get the chat linked up. So that was kind of frustrating. I want to be able to have that. So just going to there we go. The chat is up today. So I'm going to leave it up on my computer so that I can monitor that as well. So today's block, let's get into it. You can see a little bit of a hint of it here. Month 1, we did the water, right? We talked about the water. We're making a treasure map theme sort of going on. So having the water was really important because usually treasures are buried on islands. So what's the next step? We got to start thinking about the literal steps on the map. And that's our inspiration for this month. So I have my 2 versions. I'm going to do, in my print version, I'm going to do blocks where we have a path, right? It's the steps that you would need to take being marked on a map. But it's a really kind of a cool block and a neat way to sort of manage the fabric when you're doing this. So we're going to go over that. And then in my abstract version up here, I just chose a dark brown with actually like a pale yellow lighter steps. I want to keep this version where I have all dark backgrounds. So that's where this is going. This is the more abstract kind of version inspired by, and you can see that for month 1 here, I ended up sewing everything together. These are all sewn together already in a row. So that's going to be how wide my quilt is as far as I am concerned. At this point, it's not going to be a big one. I know, shocking for me to not work at a large scale. It's really very strange. Hold on, this is not coming up. There we go. Something was wrong on the laptop, just wanting to do it. So just a reminder, you can use the chat on the laptop and we'll get to see all of that. Otherwise, we should probably get into it. So fabric selection for this, before I switch the camera, I'm going with kind of beachy colors. I had initially thought I just wanted sort of more of these tone on tone, but when I went through my stash, I had a couple like this kind of has a sort of, you know, sand color to it. And then, but it was a lot darker. So I pulled in a few more darker and more obvious directional prints like these. But you could continue to use solids or really just subtle tone on tone kind of things. Anything goes. It doesn't have to be literal beach colors either. It's just kind of an interesting block and can create some interesting designs when we have a few of them together. So any color will really work for it. And then for my abstract version, I'm just, again, trying to shop from stash as much as possible here. But I actually really don't have a lot of darks in solids. So I may have to do a little bit of shopping there. But I did find this dark brown. It's showing up much lighter on here. But it is quite a bit of a dark, sort of rusty brown. And then I picked this kind of butter yellow to go with it. So I want to kind of, even though I'm using darks, I need to have contrasting colors between my rows. So having this warmer brown will be, you can see, works really well for a contrast there. So that's what we're going with. I'm going to do the abstract one first because it's super easy and you'll get the idea for the technique quite nicely in that. I have not had my tea today, so I will be sipping throughout the live. So bear with me. And it just occurred to me I should probably check and make sure my sewing machine is threaded up properly. I had been doing some other work. I haven't sewn since I prepped these blocks the night before we left. So that's almost a week. It's like shocking. I never go that long without sewing. So usual supplies, scissors. We're going to need a rotary cutter. You may or may not want a ruler. It's really actually not going to be super necessary until you finish the block when it comes to squaring up. So you might not need it today at all. So let's move you over here. I'm going to switch this around. There we go. There we go. We can say hello to the ladies. And I'm going to tilt this down. Don't worry, I'll adjust that angle. There we go. That's better. It's different when we're on YouTube because it's a horizontal versus a vertical. So I'm having to learn all of the nuances of this for filming versus Instagram, which I've kind of gotten a handle on by this point. So, oh, you know what I didn't do? I need a new blade and I'm out. Anyways, so we're going to cut to start. So you can see I need a new blade in here. I nicked it. I went over a pin. You basically need a square, a rectangle, whatever. It is going to get smaller by, I don't know, probably about I'm not actually sure if I'm being truthful. So this is not quite 7 inches tall and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, not quite 6 inches high. Let's see how much it shrinks down, but I'm going to guess it's going to shrink down by at least an inch in there. I'm going to give that a good press. Just make sure it's nice and flat. Get the wrinkles out. Okay, so we have the first thing. If we want to do, you can see on these ones, I just did, it's actually hard to see, a very sort of gradual curve in there. And then the piece that is the steps is going to be inserted in. But rather than cut separate pieces, I really just take this initial piece and cut it into the bottom, the top, and the insert here. So we're going to do 2 cuts to get us that piece. You can do it as like a quarter, an arc of sorts. You could do it as a straight line. You could do it as a wave. Any of that really kind of works for you. Okay. So I'm gonna do this one kind of on a diagonal, but I'm freehand cutting there. So I have 2 pieces, and then I've got to take one of these and I'm gonna slice it again. Now, I'm not worrying about a ruler here. I'm not worrying about it being super parallel. I'm okay with those differences. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set aside the bottom and the top. Keep them in, especially when we're working with solids, keep them laying as you cut them. And then I'm going to work with this piece here. And I want to take some scraps or some little bits of my other fabric. So I'm just going to cut a few little bits. This is a great time. You can make all your little steps from scraps with this. How big should you cut them? That's really just a matter of how big you want those pieces to be. So that's what we need for supplies in there. Good morning, Lorraine. Nice to see you on here, fellow Albertan. Right, if I remember correctly, you're down in Lethbridge area, so southern Alberta. Okay, just giving these a little press so that they were kind of wonky. Now I'm going to basically slice and insert them into here. So I've got my machine set up for just normal sewing. It's not sitting properly. I don't know why. It's on top of something. Don't know what's going on. There was a pin underneath the machine. That's why. See, pins causing problems everywhere. Sewed over a pin and everything. Okay, so now for this, we want to go in there. It's very tempting because we have this on an angle to cut our pieces and insert them this way, kind of on the vertical. But you can see already just by placing this piece on there, what happens. I'm not going to have enough covered on the bottom. So that's one issue. Secondly, if we're going with sort of that path idea, I want this to reflect that the steps would be on the path that you're walking on. So I actually want to insert them more like that, right? When we do the bigger one, I'm going to do a curve, and you'll see how we do that on the curve as well. So I'm going to go ahead and insert these, and I think this one I am going to do 3. Well, maybe just for the sake of video, I will only do 2. So I just have that for the next one. So I have this. I don't want to cut. I'm just going to make my life easier and cut, sew, cut, sew, cut, sew. So I've cut the one and I'm going to sew it. It's pretty straightforward sewing. Right? Starting and stopping. Use my little spider at the end of each seam. And you can wait, especially on these little ones, wait to press until the end. If you have these kind of messy edges like I do, you can run over it with the rotary cutter and do it. So now when I go and sew this second piece on, I'm just going to eyeball where it goes, right? I don't want to line it up like that or like that. I'm going to eyeball it so that this line is continuing over here. If it's not exact, don't worry about it. It's not necessary at all. So there I've got 2 done. Right? Then I'm going to do another one. I'm going to do this one close. Again, I'm just using the ruler to give me a straight line. I'm not so fussed about whether it's a perfect straight line. I'm going to sew on this next one here. Your sewing is just your standard, you know, more or less 1/4 inch. We're not going to be measuring it, and it doesn't have to be super precise. So just aim for as consistent as possible, right? Give this a little, just a little press there. And then we're going to do that last piece on. Apologies, my home phone is ringing. We are people who still have a landline, and the home phone's ringing. I don't know who it is, so I'm ignoring it. Okay, so there's our inserted bit, or what's going to be our inserted bit. I'm going to give that a good press now. Remember, we always want to press, not iron. So I'm just putting this on and lifting it as I move it so that I'm not stretching it out. And that's more important than ever because I cut this on the this piece is actually on the diagonal, so all these edges are biased. So I don't really want to stretch that out at all. I'm pressing, in my case, towards the dark just because that's a little bit easier in this case, and it will look better with my light background. But you can press towards the steps to make them pop out a little bit more. And indeed, on my other version, that's what I did. So you'll see that next time. So that's super simple. Now we have to, let's bring you back over here, sew it back into this piece, right? Pretty straightforward. We're going to take this piece and we're going to line them up right sides together, right? But I've got this kind of extra overhang going on here. You have two choices. You can take your ruler and give it a nice trim before you sew, lining it up on the background edges and give that nice trim, or you could sew first and then trim it. It's really up to you. Improv, so much of it is about, and then we're going to the machine, and I'm just going to bring you over here. So much of improv is about knowing the basic techniques, but then developing your own sort of way of doing them. It's like knowing how to do cursive handwriting, but nobody does it exactly the same, and everybody's handwriting is unique. Improv piecing is really the same thing. No one's going to do it exactly the same, but it all works. Tension got a little bit wonky when I dropped that. So there's our first piece sewn in. So I'm going to give this a good press before I sew the next one. So I'll set that seam, right? This piece is going to end up, you know, relatively skinny, an inch or so. So I want to make sure this is pressed nicely so I can manage any stretching, any bulk that wants to happen. I've pressed towards the bottom piece. That will always be easier if you're pressing towards the background pieces when we're joining our strip in there, because you have so many seam allowances from this, it will be quite bulky. So you can see from the back, I've pressed that down. And now we just repeat the process on the top side. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to take my top piece and fold it over so that I can add it to the top here. You can see I kind of have a wonky edge, and I'm going to go ahead and give that a trim. If you change the angle just ever so slightly, that's all right. Don't worry about that being super exactly the same. And we're going to go from there. And now I'll just take that to my machine and piece that together, and this one block will be done. Really quite straightforward. Ooh, my tension is really off now. That's all right. Got that. Then I'm going to give that a press, and I have another block. So same thing over at the iron. Going to set that seam. And then I'm going to press towards the top. So let's see what size this ended up as so we know how much things shrink down a little bit. I didn't really lose much in length. Here, I'll move this up a little bit. I didn't really lose much in length because I just had this kind of one diagonal seam. If you have a curve, it's going to come in more. And then from a height point of view, yeah, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 and a little bit. So I'm definitely came in. What was I? Was just under 6. So 1.5 inches is really kind of what I lost in there. If we remember our rule of thumb when we're cutting curves, we're going to lose about 1 inch for every cut that we make. And because we have 2, we're going to have to cut that at least 2 inches bigger than we expect. When in doubt, cut a little bit more so you have some wiggle room in there. So I'm going to add that to the ones on the design wall. And we're going to go ahead and cut the print version now. In there. Okay. Let's get the print version. This is the print one I did already, just to show you up close. So I did do one of those tone on tone prints, and I had a red sort of path going along, and I did do a curve in here. So I'm going to do a curve again for you, maybe just kind of I'll change up where it is, but remember you can play around with this. I think it'll be really interesting when I have a few blocks made. And if I hadn't been traveling this weekend, I probably would have made a few blocks to kind of see where we make a path, right? And we can play with these. We can intersperse them with blank ones. We can intersperse them with blocks we're going to make later on. So don't fill up your whole island with these blocks, but make a handful and see where they go. We are kind of thinking of the quilts as a whole as we do this, but, not designing the whole thing per se. So I'm just going to take this. I don't even know how tall that is. Oh, why do we always wait so long to change the blades on our rotary cutters? I'm going to have to go later today. So I have a little over 10 inches, and I'll do about the same for, I'll cut more or less a square so that's what I'm working with, but it'll get smaller, right? We know that. I'm going to give that a nice press. We want it smooth. We'll make things a little bit easier. An iron really is one of your best friends when you're doing improv work. Not everything can be ironed out, but a lot can. Okay. So there we have our first one. I'm going to do a curve as well on this one. And we're going to do it the same way we've done curves before, except we're not layering up, right? Typically I layer 2 fabrics right sides up. I'm just going to freehand cut these curves, but just like in the previous abstract version, I'm going to cut once and I'm going to cut twice, and I'm going to have that inserted strip. And that inserted strip is what I'm going to add the red to, okay? And we're going to do it in a very, very similar way. So on this one, I'm going to do an arc as opposed to, a quarter circle, but you can play around, have them change it up a few times, right? My last one was kind of an arc, kind of a quarter circle. This one I just wanting to go. So then I'm going to cut a second arc, more or less parallel. I'm not going to worry about it being perfectly parallel, but just more or less in there. So I'll go one, and then just, my bad, blade. So that's what we have, right? We have the bottom, we have the top, and we have our arc in the middle. So we can set aside the top and the bottom and we'll only worry about the arc at this point. I'm using red for my steps in the block. So that's what I've got here. Just like before, I'm just going to have some scraps. Cut them a little bit bigger than you need. That's fine. Right? And in this case, I want a few more. So there's going to be a little bit more starting and stopping. You know what? I'm just going to use my scissors because I don't have to worry about it. There we go. I got a blip there, so I'm not going to use that piece. So I've got a bunch. I don't know if I'll use them all, but we'll get them there and have them out of the way. So, all right. And we're going to do the same thing. I'm going to put one in, sew it on, put one in. I don't want to cut all these pieces. You can. You absolutely can. I find it easier for myself. Again, this is part of that process. I find it easier for myself to manage everything, particularly when there's going to end up being a lot of small pieces, if I do it one at a time. That way, I don't worry so much about, oh shoot, was that piece there? Was that piece there? Dog walked in, a kid walked in, and things got messed up. So I've just cut the one piece, and I'm going to cut them. That's why I grabbed the scissors, because I'm going to cut them trying to mimic the arc, just like I did on the diagonal one where we still wanted to have it kind of flow on the line and not just necessarily be vertical. I want my pieces to arc across this as well. So it does mean a lot of starting and stopping, less efficient than chain piecing. But again, if you're comfortable with that, go for it. I just like to, because the other thing, especially when we do these curves, it can help us keep together the arc as we go, right? I can lay it down here and go, okay, I know this piece needs to go on here, as opposed to kind of getting it all messed up. We are going to recut the arc when we put it back into these pieces, but we want to minimize how much we have to trim off, right? So again, next piece is going to get sewn on, and we'll just continue down the line. So starting, stopping. This is where if we weren't live, we could just fast forward through all of this. So, Connie said she's had some trouble getting on this morning, and I'm drinking coffee, not tea. Don't get me wrong. I am drinking coffee. You know me. I would never drink coffee. I am drinking tea. It's just very black tea because I need it. See, there's my teapot. Definitely drinking tea this morning. There. And I need more, so I do like strong tea. Connie, I won't lie. I don't like it when it's bitter, but I do like it nice and black in there. Okay, so there's the first one, and then we're just going to repeat as we go. Remember, you're going to lose seam allowances as you go. We're adding obviously some fabric, but we're not adding huge pieces. But it's shortening up the white or the beige background, but we're adding in some of the others. I want to press as I go with this because it will help keep things a little bit more organized. So nice press. I'm going to go there. If you need to straighten up edges as you go, you can do that. You can fudge things a little. Right? This is improv work. It's not going to be perfection. It's going to be perfect improv, which means it's not perfect. Right? So it's a little bit tedious to get through all of these, but we're going to do it. And I'll just chat with you while we're going through. I have to say, haven't been to San Diego since, well, in about 20 years. My husband and I went to San Diego. I had to go to work there for work. I was giving a presentation. Oh, right when we moved to Calgary. So yeah, about 20 years ago. And my husband came with me. And we tagged on. We were down at Coronado. We tagged on a couple of extra days. On one extra day, we went surfing. I think we took surfing lessons, or maybe we just rented stuff and tried to teach ourselves because we'd taken lessons before. That was what we did one of our free days. And then on the other free day, we rented a car and drove around trying to get our hands on a Dyson vacuum because they weren't for sale yet in Canada at that point. And we really wanted one because we had 2 dogs and we'd heard such good things about them. So we went on this like mission through San Diego and area to try to find the specific Dyson we wanted. It was, yeah, not your ideal way to spend a day in California when you're from Canada, but we got our Dyson in the end. Took it home as a piece of luggage, and yeah, it's still in use 20 years later. So that was the last time I was in San Diego, and the only other time before that was, you know, the typical family trip when you're a kid where we did Disney and Knott's Berry Farm and the San Diego Zoo and SeaWorld and all of that. So it had been a while. Very nice though. Very nice break. So I'm just going there. Add another one. See, I just kind of following the arc and kind of basically the rule of thumb, I would say, for cutting across so that these pieces arc too, is to be kind of, if you imagine a plane on your arc, like a straight line. Let's get the ruler. A straight line on the edge of that. So like that, you're cutting perpendicular to that. And that will help these step pieces arc across as well. It's absolutely not necessary, but it is one of those just subtle little design things that will really amp up how this works out for you. In there. So, almost done. Oops, I became unthreaded. Oh my goodness. I'd say it's Monday morning, but it's Tuesday, isn't it? It's Tuesday, but it is my Monday morning. That's for sure. That's for sure. But I went to bed right after the kids last night because we stayed up way too late as the chaperone. I was in a house on this trip. I was the chaperone in a house with 8 teenagers. We rented houses so that we could cook and everything. 8 teenagers and the 2 teachers from our school. And one of the teachers happens to be a very good friend of mine. So we would often stay up late. Most nights the teenagers were staying up later than us, and we still felt we were staying up late. And then it was long days. So needless to say, I needed to go to bed early last night. So when we put the kids, came home, saw the girls, put my son to bed because he'd basically been running around like a maniac all weekend. Then I went to bed too. Okay, so let's just talk about that plane again. So if I take my ruler and I imagine kind of right where I want to cut, I'm going to say it's right here on this line. I'm going to cut kind of perpendicular to what line that was, this flat line. It's just a little bit of a guide. It's not a hard and fast thing. In there. There. Rethreading the machine helped my attention too. Okay, so we're getting there. Almost done that. I think I might do one more. But before I decide on whether I'm going to do that last one or not, I am going to hold it up against my top and bottom that I have here. Right? So I have my top and bottom. I am going to give this a good press. So let's go back over here. I have a curve, so I want to be really careful when I'm pressing it that I'm not stretching it out. So I'm just going to kind of go one seam to the next. Making sure my seam allowances stay going the way that I want. So you can also press from the back, but it's really easy to kind of pull one of the ends out, and that's when you're going to get it stretched, and we don't want that. So I'm just going to go one at a time here. There we go. Nice and flat. Now, the more gradual the curve that you've cut, the less you're going to lose of things. If you cut sort of a really sharp curve, once you start adding these pieces in, you're going to lose length. But see, that's why I wanted to check. Because if I add another one, it's going to get cut off on the side, which may or may not be an issue for you. But I'm going to go ahead and not do that. Okay, so now it's the same thing. We just need to attach the top and the bottom. Pretty straightforward, right? I'm just going to move these this way, actually, this way, for me to make the cut, because I am going to have to recut this line here. But we can't do it like we did the previous block where it was on a diagonal, because we need to have those curves match. So I'm actually just going to lay my bottom piece on top of this piece, and I'm going to give myself a fresh cut through both of them. The nice thing is that with the red, I can actually see where my edges are. It's hard, it's not showing up on the camera very well, but I can see it. So other than the fact that I have the dull nicked blade, but I will just be careful. But I'm just going to go along. I'm not worried about being exactly on the line of the bottom piece that I had, but pretty close, right? It's my guide as I go along there. So I just got that, and I'm just going to, because of my blade, double check there. So now I have that nice matching arc. Trimmed off a little bit. And I have that nice matching cut along there. In this case, I am going to sew it like this at the machine, because I like to have that concave curve on the bottom when I sew. So I'm going to go ahead here. If you're joining the YouTube and you haven't done these curves before and you just went, what the heck did she just do? Go back to Instagram and review a few of the videos for the Quilters Playcation from last year, because we did curves a lot in there. And the basic rule of thumb when we're doing curves is that you have to remember to cut your pieces right sides up, so that you get that same arc in there. And then sew them right sides together. And when we sew them, you'll notice I'm only worrying about sort of the inch in front of me at one time. So there's what I have for the first one. I'm going to go and press this really, really well. As much as I would like to press it towards the arc, did I do that on the first one? No, it's going to be bulky because this is not a big piece. So I am pressing towards that bottom piece. Oh, I really got to fix that tension on my machine too. Thankfully, it's just one of them, so I can kind of pull it out. I'm just using my thumb to get that a little bit out. Right, so there it is, laying nicely that way. And then we do the same thing with the other one, with the top piece. Right, I'm going to layer them, make sure this top piece is nicely pressed. And I'm going to layer it here, just ever so slightly on top. Right, and then give myself a fresh trim. Now I want to minimize how much I'm cutting off because it's going to get real skinny in there, which will look cool, but you know, you don't want to have your work disappear either. I just need to move this a little bit to get that cut. This is extra, so I'm just going to cut that off. And then of course I moved it. So get that to lay there and give myself a fresh cut along this. I'm using what I'd already cut as a guide, but if I don't get it exactly on, I'm not going to stress. Did pretty good. Just these little bits coming off, mostly just the red there. And then same thing, I like having my concave, this one, on the bottom and this on the top. So I'm going to go to the machine. I'm only worried about lining it up. This time I'll let you see the sewing a little bit better. So get in, right, have that in there, and then I'm just going to slowly guide it through. I don't want to be pulling on either the top or the bottom. The machine actually does quite a bit of work for you on this. We're just guiding it in, making sure if every now and then you need to lift up the presser foot. My other machine has that hover function, which is fantastic when you're sewing improv curves because it just pops up just enough so you don't actually need to lift it. Or if you have a knee lift bar, a lot of people like those in there. And then we're just going to go all the way through. The good, when we're doing it this way, we get to see, make sure we don't have our seam allowances folded. If you fold one, don't worry about it too much. It's not going to ruin anything. Okay, so my tension is a little bit, it wants to gather it. So I'm just before I even go to press, I can smooth that out a little bit. I think this machine needs a tune-up is really what it does. Okay, let's press it. Remember, like always, we wait for the final reveal, but the pressing will be just like we did before. I'm pressing towards that top piece, giving it a nice smooth line so that the block lays as flat as it can. If you need to, remember you can use steam. You can use flatter, which is this great pressing spray. Works wonderful for improv piecing. There we go. I got that block done. So there is our reveal of the block. I'm going to not square it up at this point. I don't exactly know how things are going to come together, so I'm giving myself options, but you can see how it's going to, it can play with the other one, right? I can have sort of some things, right? I could move things down so that the line continues, right? I don't have to have my blocks necessarily one against the other. I could do some interesting things and kind of make that path. Ooh, I like that, actually. I think that's kind of neat. Could be really neat to do some things along that way. So that is block number 2, which is our steps on the treasure map, what we're doing. So let me bring you back up Did we say hello to the girls before? We can say hello to them now. Hi. Talking about the overall point of view for our quilt, I will admit, thinking about how this might all come together in there. So I may take some of these water blocks and add a strip of this sort of beachy color so that it kind of flows and then it's not a harsh edge to it. I don't think it matters either way. It can work both ways, but because this one is, a little bit more literal, I might do some of those things and have some kind of interesting edges and stuff along the way. We are going to be filling in our map with different elements that come on a treasure map. So don't make all of these to fill in space in the middle because we're going to be adding other blocks to it. So you can do some really interesting things that way. So make a few blocks and then we'll see where we're going. It may be that at the end of this entire process, we have to move you this way. It may be that at the end of this entire process, we're going to have to make more blocks or edit and take some out to get ourselves to a full quilt top, if that's the direction we're going. And that'll be totally fine. That's the part of an adventure. I don't know if I ever told you this. There's my phone again. I don't know if I ever told you this, but in our family, we define an adventure. Yeah, I don't know who's calling. We define an adventure as an excursion where somebody or something doesn't come back. Everything else is just an excursion, right? So hike through the forest, an excursion, because of course everybody's coming back in there. But the reason I actually chose the word adventure here is because we may need to edit things out and we're going to trim things off. So not everything is going to make it into the final product, and that's okay because it's just kind of fun that way. So that is month two of our adventure Sewalong. I'm having a great time. I'm really still very nerdy about this whole concept this year. I think it's really fun. We're going to have a great time with it. I have so many good ideas for adding to this and things that we can do. I think it'll be really, really cool. The chat is there and open for those of you who are watching live. You're welcome to ask any questions at this point or at any other point. I still have tea left. I will have to go to the grocery store after this. A weekend of cooking, and sorry, I said 8 teenagers and the 2 teachers, but our house was closer to the theater where the kids were. So it meant that the other 7 kids and the other chaperones often came to our house to eat too, or came during breaks in the day. So it's been 15 kids and multiple trips to the beach when we had enough of a break. One boy he'd been to Mexico when he was 2, so he has no recollection of ever seeing the ocean before. So he was so excited. That was actually one of the highlights for me to see him do that. My son he's recovered enough that he was able to go, and I think he was running on adrenaline the whole time because we got home and last night he broke out in a rash. And he was back to coughing this morning, but feeling energetic enough to go to school. So we'll see. I think that it's just his body has worn down after a weekend. My son is a performer to the extreme, and being the youngest, or one of the 2 youngest, I think, there meant he had the undivided attention of teenagers who weren't irritated by him, like his sisters. So they were entertained by him. So he was in fine form. He danced well. He did 2 dances, and in his contemporary, he had a flub. And he kind of panicked and lost his choreography and got upset and ran off the stage. But it's a pretty relaxed environment. He ran off the stage into the arms of his teacher, and she asked him immediately, "Do you want to do it again?" And he said yes, and they let him. There were a couple of other kids that, for different reasons, like one girl's point shoe fell off, not from our group, but from another group, they let her dance again. So it's not like that Dance Moms like high stakes competition. So he came out again and killed it and did really well. So that was good. And we had an issue with his ballet costume, not because of me, but because he forgot something. But that all got sorted out, and he was just so happy. And that's all I care about. That's all I care about, is that he's doing what he loves, and we will support him and back him up on that. Maybe next year's adventure Sewalong will have to be dance themed. I don't know. You never know where this will go, because it's an adventure. That's the whole point, right? Okay, folks, I've been on now for almost an hour. Thanks. I hope you enjoyed this month too. If you're watching a recording, have a great day. Those of you who stuck with me live today, thank you. It was lovely to see you all again. We will see you next time. And remember, you can post things on Instagram. We'll be happy to see it. I'm going to have to get some stuff together and share it, because I think we're doing really good. It's really fun. I've seen some cool things already this month. And remember, you don't have to do it the way I'm doing it. You can, like your own handwriting, take it in a direction that you absolutely love and see what works for you. Otherwise, we're going to have fun. All right. Take care, everybody. This has been Cheryl Larkison with month 2 of the Quilters Playcation Adventure Sewalong. Love you all. We will see you next month. Bye.